Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is David Horrigan. I'm Relativity's Discovery Counsel and Legal Education Director, and we'd like to welcome you to a special broadcast. This one is going to be very interesting, very fun, and we hope something really valuable for your careers. The webinar is entitled Relativity Skills Impact on the EDiscovery Job Market. It's a 5-year analysis, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how this report was created, the background on it. But first, I'd like to introduce the people who are going to be joining us today. First, we have someone who is no stranger to the eDiscovery community. Jared Coseglia is the founder and CEO of True Staffing Partners. He has been a mainstay in this industry for many years. Spoken at many conferences, including Relativity Fest, we're proud to say, Legal Tech, Legal Week when it became Legal Week, and of course, ILTACon as well. Jared, it's always a pleasure to share the podium with you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, and so excited to share all this research with everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Jared. Next is Danielle Urban. She's Senior Manager on our certifications team here at Relativity. She is a Relativity veteran, having been with Relativity for 11 years. As her title implies, she knows the ins and outs of certifications. Thank you, Danielle, for being here.
Thanks.
And finally, Parker Strubhar is a specialist on our certifications team at Relativity. Parker joined us last year, and he brings certification experience from the American Bankers Association. We tend to be an insular group here in the e-discovery industry, so it's good to have the perspectives from major organizations such as the American Bankers Association. Parker, we're glad you're here on the team and glad you're here with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be a part of it.
Excellent. So as we're moving on, and by the way, MT with the True Staffing is going to be joining us on the slides today. We're going to start off with, thank you, MT, for being with us to join us here. We're going to start off with the report background. And this is a 5-year report, as the title implies. So Jared, let's start with you and get your feelings and background on how this whole thing came to be.
Yeah, so it really was born not for research purposes, but actually to solve a problem in the industry as relativity around 2015-16 really began to proliferate in terms of utilization and adoption. And as it rapidly grew in adoption, what we found on the staffing side of the business is that a lot of our customers were needing a far more nuanced degree of understanding of people's relativity skills that they weren't getting on the resume. And look, this was a double-edged sword problem. A lot of times the candidates, as they were seeking jobs and looking to leverage what they knew, didn't know what to articulate. How much was too much? How much was too much detail or not enough detail? What areas were of greater interest to hiring managers about my relativity skill set on my resume? And so we got together with Danielle, in fact, to put together collaboratively what we're calling our relativity self-assessment checklist. And so the self-assessment solved a couple of problems. One, it gave job seekers a way to articulate their level of confidence in what is now 65 different skill sets that we've identified in relativity as the most commonly or frequently asked for skill sets, or some of the more nuanced and desired skill sets that are sometimes frequently difficult to find. And we've asked everybody to score themselves in terms of no experience, some experience, advanced experience, or expert level experience. So now the job seekers, they go to market, and I can tell you that 75% of the eDiscovery customers that we represent now ask for and request that this checklist, this self-assessment, accompany any candidate that we submit to them where they're looking for relativity skill sets in addition to a resume. So they can see, where are they strong? Where do they not have confidence? What skill sets are they weak in? And so they have a much more nuanced understanding of the relativity skill sets going into an interview, so that they're peeling down to layer 3, 4, 5 of the onion instead of chipping away at the marble at the beginning of an interview process. And so it's expedited the interview process. It's helped hiring managers be much more articulate with us and with job seekers about expectations in the role, and reciprocally allow job seekers to be much more thoughtful about how comfortable and confident they are in their skill set. We can go to the next slide to show you what it actually looks like, because that would probably be helpful to get a visual of what it is. And this research is based on over 3,400 applicants, unique applicants. Some over the course of 5 years filled the application out a second or third time to update themselves and their candidacy. But as you can see here, these are the different skills. We ask job seekers to go through and score themselves based on expertise. And once they've done all of that, they get a matrix that looks essentially just like this. And that is the report that's generated for each individual candidate. And what we've done is aggregated all of the data from 34,000 applicants over the last 5 years. And we've been doing it for longer than that, but we just found that it would be most relevant to compartmentalize it to those 5 years to get into all the analysis we're going to talk about today.
Great stuff. Thanks, Jared. Danielle, as Jared mentioned, you were part of the team. This thing started back in 2016. You worked with True on developing this from the relativity perspective and from the certifications perspective. What went into developing it? What did you decide would be good to include? And how did this great thing come to fruition?
Well, really, the True team gets a lot of credit. They came to Relativity with the idea, and they had a draft, I believe, version, if I'm remembering correctly. And we said, cool, this is like great. Let's evolve it and kind of align it with how, like, we just changed some like verbiage a little bit from like skilled, advanced, expert. We added some things like some competencies or skills, and annually we kind of like look at it and refresh it based on what's changing with our product or the industry as well.
Sounds great. Now it's that time when we get into the nuts and bolts of the report and what the findings were. I'm really looking forward to seeing this. MT, if we can go on to the report findings section. And our first topic is moving to the cloud, fait accompli. This has been a big issue for our entire industry. The move to the cloud has been rapid, and it's been really transforming. As many of you know, we began Relativity 1 here at Relativity, and that's part of our journey to the cloud. We obviously, of course, remain true to the on-premises heritage too. It's great to have both options with Relativity Server and Relativity 1. Jared, when you're talking about the move to the cloud, we see the data here. That's a huge jump in the use of Relativity 1.
Yeah, so let me explain what this data actually tells us, which is separate from the actual 65 different skill sets that we list. This data comes from us asking all applicants what versions of Relativity that they're using. So this is an all-encompassing, not an either or. So what you see here are pretty dramatic swings of how many people are using Rel 1 in 2018 to 2020 to how many people have been using it from 2021 to today. That doesn't mean that those 64% are not using Rel Server as well and on-prem as well. My assumption is a lot of them probably are. There is overlap. But what you're seeing here is that there's been tremendous adoption to the cloud. And the reason why we ask this question is because we are seeing a significant uptick over the course of these years that is almost as reflective as the increase of user availability in hiring managers saying, I really need somebody who understands Rel 1. I want someone I can plug and play right away, who's a contractor, who's worked in Rel 1, and I don't have 3 to 6 weeks or however long it might take to help facilitate the transition and some of the nuances from prem to 1. So for a contractor, I need that right away. We are seeing that kind of demand from customers who are deep inside specific versions of Relativity. But I will say this, what we're not seeing is a reluctance of people to accept that skills are transferable. Meaning if you don't have cloud and you have plenty of prem, for the most part, particularly for full-time permanent positions, direct hire positions, non-contract roles, people are willing to help facilitate that transition and vice versa. And what we're seeing with so much adoption in the cloud is that sometimes it actually does go the reverse way now, where someone new to the industry has been using only the cloud for the last few years, and now they're moving to an environment that largely uses prem. And so there is a little bit of a learning curve, but for the most part, we're seeing employers are willing to adapt to that for direct hires. But there's no question that cloud adoption is extreme.
All right, thanks, Jared. That's a great segue into our next section of the report's findings. And that, of course, is the infrastructure administrative skills, the coin of the realm if you are in an on-premises shop. What do we see here, Jared?
Yeah, so if you look at this pie chart, just to explain what we're looking at here, this pie chart is people that are experts in everything but infrastructure. And then that blue sliver is how many people are really focused on infrastructure. And if you look at the chart next to it, what you're seeing here, that those big, long kind of yellow lines, that's people with no infrastructure experience. So what that's telling us is the bulk of the job seeking marketplace are not infrastructure specialists, right? In fact, most people are specializing in all the other stuff we're going to talk about today. But the kind of double edge of that sword is that there also aren't that many jobs for people who are infrastructure specialists. Now, this is somewhat a reflection of more people moving to the cloud and not needing as many human capital investments in infrastructure because of growth in prem and more growth in cloud. And what it will do is a couple of things, and we'll talk about that later. But without a growing ecosystem of this talent, it will be difficult to replace people who leave. And when they do leave, it will be very expensive because there isn't a big corpus of professionals diversified in years of experience that are available when a job like this does become open for someone who leans heavily on an on-prem model. So we'll give some guidance and advice later, but the short of it is you should be training additional people in your organization if you're an on-prem model and making sure that you have redundancy in your staff just as much as you do have redundancy in your data.
Thanks, Jared. You've spoken at many conferences over the years, and we spoke together once in Legal Week on some of these topics, and you addressed them at the University of Florida EDiscovery Conference, and that was the increase in data privacy roles. You talked about that at Relativity Fest, and when I look at these data here, I notice configuring two-factor user authentication is where we see the most people citing expert status. You've got things like that. Setting up VPNs, of course, is also for data privacy. Have you seen vis-a-vis EDiscovery data privacy take a bigger role as you look at the data from the assessment?
Yes, although I think the skill sets that you're describing here would be categorized as more of an IT or security function than really what data privacy professionals are spending a large portion of their time doing, even on the technical side of things. But I think a savvy to data privacy or cybersecurity as it relates to your EDiscovery cases is no longer a nice to have. It is a growing expectation, along with some other skill sets that we'll talk about later today, that are no longer just niches for people to become, experts, but rather things that everybody in the corpus of the industry are expected to have base sets of knowledge on.
You make a great point, and we should never confuse data privacy with data protection, the cyber instances. What I was really wondering, and I should have articulated it better, is when you get into these cyber issues, data privacy is one of the big driving forces behind making these improvements in data protection, sort of the yin and yang, as it were, data privacy and data protection. But when we look at these data, is there anything else that jumps out at you as far as things that have changed over the years? We see that two-factor, as we mentioned, is right there at the top. Agents and servers are there. I would assume that agents and servers is something that has been used from almost day one.
Yeah, I mean, this is still really an IT function when we start to look at how hiring managers are compartmentalizing talent to be domain experts in these infrastructure skills versus all the other things that go into managing a case or managing a project. These are not that. These are not case specific. Okay. These are really institutional. And so, how much more human capital is needed to scale on-prem models versus how much human capital is needed to scale case and growth and business growth and revenue generation growth. And I think what we're seeing is we need less people in this vertical, but there's some risk there as a community in that if we're not perpetuating an ecosystem of fresh young talent getting into this part of the business, then when we have attrition, it can be very expensive to go and steal someone who's a plug and play infrastructure relativity expert from a competitor or from a law firm that's a prem model and bring them back into the business.
Great. Thanks, Jared. Before we leave this topic, I wanted to follow up on one thing. I suppose as these roles may get more rare, that they also become more compensated. Does your data on the job market indicate that? Are these people, frankly, individuals who are really sought after because they are in fact so rare?
Well, yes and no. I don't think they're that sought after, because if they were, there'd be a lot more jobs and a lot more people trying to become people like that to get those jobs, right? And so I think when they are sought after, they're very, very highly prized. And yes, I mean, we see people making 20 to 40% increases in roles like this, even in a down economy, right? So if you're saying to yourself, yeah, well, I'm a specialist, I may not have a lot of opportunity out there in the marketplace to make job moves, but when I do make a job move and one's available, I'm going to be able to make a big bump in pay. Yes, I would say that is a safe assumption. The macroeconomics of that all mathematically make sense. And we're seeing that in practice when we do get occasional positions, I'd probably say a handful a year of positions like this, as opposed to project managers where there's handfuls a week in terms of volume.
Sounds great. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that's processing. And Parker, we'd like to get you in on this one, but before we get to Parker on this one, Jared, what do you get from these data?
Yeah, so this is fascinating. So what you're looking at here, that blue line is people that say no knowledge in processing, in the general processing skills on our checklist. They're saying, don't touch it, don't get involved with it, 0. That number's dropped a lot. So the amount of people who are abstaining from processing knowledge or have been able to avoid learning things about processing and doing it on the job is decreasing. Conversely, the processing expert line is the orange line. Those are people that have gone from some experience or advanced experience to saying, okay, I'm a relativity processing expert. That line has gone up almost as dramatically as the no experience has gone down. And so what does that tell us? So there are a couple of things. The first of which is people are using tools to be all-in-one solutions more readily. For those of you that have been in the industry as long as I have, you remember the days of 17 different patchworks of technology to do legal hold, collections, processing, review, production. Maybe we're running it through 3 different tools to run production. And as the industry consolidated, both in a software and service provider vertical, what we started seeing is the all-in-one tools emerge, which is more or less what's out there right now. I mean, there are very few tools that don't try to do everything and own the full spectrum of the process. And so as Relativity really integrated processing, we've seen the industry adopt it and use it and integrate it, ask for it more frequently. And there is a corpus of people growing, available job seekers that have that skill set. So this is what I would call healthy industry growth, right? Where the availability of talent and the desire for those skill sets is increasing more or less at an equilibrium, whereas infrastructure, the total opposite, right? It's like feast or famine on the infrastructure side from a job order and job opportunity and job seeker perspective. Here, you've got options as both job seeker and as hiring manager. And then the last observation, and this is a little bit more of a deduction upon that deduction, right? And is a little anecdotal based on what we see happening in the marketplace. An all-in-one tool now allows smaller firms or smaller service providers or corporations to do a little bit of everything, to say we're going to keep some of those cases that are small in size that we would normally send out, and we're going to generate revenue that way, or be a profit center that way, or be a cost reduction center that way by internalizing some of these tools. And as a result, we are seeing that in that small to boutique size marketplace, a demand for talent that reflects the tool, meaning an all-in-one tool sometimes requires an all-in-one talent, somebody who knows how to use the full functionality of the tool, from legal hold to processing, to review, to analytics, to production, and everything in between. And so if you're someone that is that, you may have leverage in a smaller firm if you enjoy touching the technology and being involved both consultatively and tactically and technically throughout the course of the life cycle of a case.
Thanks, Jared. Parker, as we look at this, Jared mentioned that Relativity is now an all-in-one platform. We take our customers and partners all the way across the litigation and legal life cycles. And of course, processing is a big part of that. What do you see from the certification standpoint as far as processing goes?
Yeah, so this data here on this graph really aligns with the data from the certification side. So since 2016, with our processing specialist exam, we've seen a drastic increase in both the number of attempts as well as pass rate as well. So kind of as the product's capabilities for processing have evolved and continue to grow, we've seen a huge growth in interest in the exam, and I guess you could say more passion for preparing for this exam as pass rates have gone up so drastically. And as of today, we're up to near 500 certified professionals with the processing specialist exam in 24 different countries.
Wow, that's great. Thanks, Parker. Let's move on to our next part of the litigation life cycle, and that is, of course, review, the big one, as they say. Jared, what do you see in the data here?
You know, it's always harder to interpret data when it doesn't have dramatic changes, right? Like the processing, when you see it, you're like, oh, I get it. This one's a little more nuanced. So what you're looking at here are what we would do, or what we would consider tactical skill sets versus the more strategic skill sets as it relates to review. And what we're seeing is a little bit of an uptick in the people, generally speaking, as in terms of, I categorize myself as tactically very sound, but a decrease actually in the amount of people that are considering themselves strategic. So what does that really tell us? And here's what it means when we really unpack the numbers. The volume of people in the marketplace that are becoming tactically experts in relativity is enormous. The volume, right? So it's expanding horizontally if we think about it in 3 dimensions. Whereas the amount of those people that are escalating from being tactical to highly strategic is diminishing in comparison to the growth in the tactical skill sets. So essentially what we're seeing is not enough people relative to the volume of tactical moving up to strategic. And in some ways, this is the most important takeaway of this session, because if there are that many people out there who are getting the basics, then those people have a clear vertical path for financial mobility and career mobility by moving into becoming more strategic with how they're using relativity.
Thanks, Jared. We'd like to get the certifications viewpoint on this one from Relativity. So Danielle, can you give us the perspective from the way you see it?
Yeah, you know, looking back to 2016, we had previously offered an exam called the Relativity Certified User. And the exam was really focusing on like review and relativity, but at a higher level. It wasn't necessarily targeting like an end user, for example, or a contract attorney, except that name certified user like really wasn't well positioned. Excuse me, wasn't well positioned. So we rebranded that name, that exam, to the Relativity Review Management Specialist. And the target audience is now far better aligned to what the exam content is. Previously, we were seeing kind of like folks get a little bit confused about like who the exam is for, taking it, studying for it, and then still being surprised. Now, really that exam focuses on like the skills needed to be a review manager leading an effective review. And you know, I share this because that is one, we want more strategic skills, which I think completely aligns with that exam. And it's super popular. So it's one, we've got over 1,500 certified professionals on it. And I guess I will also say that it's really interesting. Obviously, I knew the skills like matrix was a thing that True offered, but I didn't know that they were kind of tracking this data over time. And I kind of wanted to just get in there that in each section from REL 1, like the cloud versus on-prem, to infrastructure review, analytics, and a little bit of admin, the trends that Jared's seeing in his data are reflected in our cert data too, doing this completely separately. And so I think it's cool to note that. And when we see a tick in, you know, more attempts, more people passing review management, that kind of aligns with this as well.
Danielle, one follow-up question for you on this.
Yeah.
We have another exam, the Relativity 1 Review Pro exam.
Yeah.
And to the extent you can say, because, these questions are kept very confidential to
Yes, sure.
the integrity of the test solid. But does the Relativity 1 Review Pro exam differ substantially from the overall review exam?
It does. So in our certification program, we've got different levels. The pro exams are really that like foundational knowledge. So, and specifically the Review Pro exam is geared towards that end user, that contract attorney document review role. So if you take that exam, one, it's like very low barrier to entry, very achievable for anyone. If you've had like 20 years of experience, or if you're very new to the industry and like just looking to get some more like what is review and relativity knowledge, although it does seem like that is more prevalent. But it's very achievable and very differently focused than the review management specialist. Our specialist exams take a deeper dive into kind of that portion of the product, like analytics or processing or review management, I should say. And so they're definitely geared toward different target audiences.
Hey, thanks for that deep dive, because I think some of our listeners were going to want to know about the differences there. Let's go on to our next topic. And of course, that is advanced analytics. This has been a big growth area over the last few years. Jared, why don't you take us through the data?
Yeah, so I love this one because it's what I call chicken or egg. And I hear this from our customers and from our job seekers who we represent all the time. How am I supposed to use my analytics skills, or why should I get them when I can't get my attorneys, and my attorneys refuse to engage in analytics and only using them on 8 to 12% of my cases, versus if I have these analytics skills and I was able to evangelize them, maybe I would get more attorneys to use analytics on more cases, right? It's chicken or egg. So what we're seeing here is a little bit of that uncertainty in the marketplace, right? Essentially what you've seen is from 16 to 18 and from 18 to 21 and from 21 to present, the amount of people that consider themselves experts in analytics has not really changed, right? It's more or less the same amount of people. Now, good news is the amount of people that consider themselves advanced or skilled in analytics has gone from 60 to 80%. And the people that say, I don't have any analytics skills, is now less than 20% of the job seekers over the last 2.5 years that we've done this study. So what does that actually tell us? It tells us a couple of things. The first of which is analytics is not an expertise and a niche that someone does and only does. And if it is, those jobs are very rare. We like to call this role like a analytics overlay, meaning this person is an analytics expert, but they are not managing cases. They are not the day-to-day point of contact for a project or a client or a contract. That's not really out there that much. Now, reciprocally, what is out there is the demand for project managers and coordinators in EDiscovery to be able to wield analytics and have advanced or skilled level knowledge of analytics, because it is no longer somebody we're going to lean on to come in and do it. We expect everybody to have basic knowledge of analytics and soon advanced knowledge of analytics who are managing the cases day to day. And that's the trend we're seeing. And we're seeing that anecdotally from our customers who are saying, hey, I need a project manager and I really need somebody that understands structured analytics and knows the difference and knows how to use relativity to help us wield it in the way that we need it to for different kinds of analytics. And so we're seeing more project managers move in that direction. And my guess is that Parker and Danielle will tell us that we're seeing more people take that exam and maybe, I don't know, and I don't know if they can share this, but I would guess the pass rate is not as high as the processing pass rate. My guess is a lot more people that take processing pass it than they do analytics, because what we're not seeing is enough experts, not that we're not seeing enough experts, enough job seekers who have the confidence to score themselves experts. And is that because, hey, they don't have the knowledge and they didn't pass the exam, or hey, I'm not using this stuff every day because I don't have an opportunity to leverage that knowledge. Is it chicken or is it egg? I don't know. It's a really interesting argument.
Mr. Coseglia, once again, another brilliant segue. Parker, years ago, when we attorneys were first looking at some of the analytics, we're like, wow, this is a video game. We had never seen anything like it, nor did we know the back end on how to use it and how manipulate it and how to make it best serve the client's cases. On those questions Jared brought up, what have you seen as far as pass rates and the importance of this advanced analytics exam as opposed to some of the other exams and certifications we have?
Yes, Jared is definitely correct in his thinking that we have seen the pass rate and attempts for our analytics specialist exam go up drastically since 2016. And to speak to kind of the importance of analytics in the overall eDiscovery workflow, while we do have the analytics specialist exam that takes a very deep dive into it, we also have analytics content kind of peppered into a lot of our more general exams about the overall workflow as well. So that kind of speaks to the importance and interest in analytics as not solely a niche, but as a larger component of using our platform. And yeah, we're now up to over 600 certified professionals in this exam across 25 countries. So definitely speaks to a lot of professionals curious to add some portion of analytics to their overall skill set.
Thanks, Parker. Danielle, it was surprising to me to learn that we had more certified professionals in advanced analytics than we had in processing. I take it you're seeing the same thing. Advanced analytics is becoming much more critical for the eDiscovery community and for the relativity community specifically.
Yeah, I mean, Parker kind of touched on this. Like, we made the decision a few years ago, generally speaking, that analytics was going to be part of like core relativity and the core workflows that we like advocate, the best practices that we want folks to use because it makes their job easier or faster, et cetera. And so yes, we do have more currently certified analytics specialists, but processing is, I would say, rapidly catching up. And you can find analytics from our pro exams to our specialists to our admin exam.
Excellent, thanks. All right, we're moving on into our next section of the program, and that I think is what a lot of people really want to hear, and both if you're an employer and a prospective employee, and that's TRU's guidance for the hiring managers and job seekers. Jared, what is your first piece of advice for our viewers today?
Yeah, so let's talk to job seekers first, and let's talk about analytics first. And MT, there you go. So the thing for you to know if you're a job seeker as it relates to analytics is if you're an expert in analytics, you are definitely going to get a leg up in the job market, both in terms of viable opportunities and in terms of increased compensation. A project manager who can go in with confidence and say, yeah, whether it's structured data or visualizations or whatever you need in the analytics portfolio, I can do that, is going to be of far greater interest, especially in a down economy, than a project manager that's like, yeah, I could do everything but that, right? So we can definitely say this gives you competitive advantage and will give you a leg up financially. In terms of processing, I think the guidance and advice here is that we still are seeing the market starting to level up and formalize this. I think there are probably a lot of people that are processing data and relativity that have not gone out and certified yet. And my advice is to do it, especially if you're at a vendor, because having more people on your staff that are formally certified is a marketing leverage for your organization and has value. And if you're looking for buy-in as a job seeker to get your employer to sponsor you getting that certification, this is one way to do it. Hey, listen, how can we market my skills? Well, more people give us processing work if they know I'm certified, and the chances are generally that they will. Also, I think it's important to know with processing that if you're looking to work at a smaller firm or at a more boutique vendor, it's important to have more skills that touch all parts of the technology. We're just seeing a higher demand for job seekers that are all-in-one, for people that are using a tool as an all-in-one solution. In terms of review, this is really important because this is where the most job seekers are, right? get a deeper dive on the strategic skills. And that means more project management, right? That project management certification and the skill sets and knowledge bases that go with that are good to tie with the more strategic sides of review. That will give you vertical financial leverage in the industry. And look, if you're a contract review attorney saying to yourself, how do I differentiate from the hundreds of thousands of peers out there that have the same skill set as me, as demonstrated by the growth in basic relativity expertise at the review level, this is the way to do it. Go for those strategic review sets, a lot of which are analytics driven. And then on the technical infrastructure side, just know there are going to be fewer jobs out there. So be prepared for that. Know that you don't have a lot of options, but know that when you do have options, that you will have negotiating power, because there won't be a lot of options other than you out there. So this is our guidance for job seekers. And we can take questions now too, if we've got any specific or hold for the end, David, before we go on to hiring manager guidance.
Yeah, we'll definitely do some questions at the end, but we invite anyone to submit any questions right now. If you've got any questions on particular items that you see as we go through the conversation, but we will have some time at the end to go through these questions. All right, Jared, we've talked about the job seekers. Let's go to the other side of the table, the hiring managers, and your advice for them.
Yeah, so this guidance and advice is maybe not as obvious as the job seeker advice, and it's really important stuff. And the deduction of all of this information, the juicy kernels are right here. So the first of which is, we want to encourage hiring managers that are out there to create positions that are analytics overlays. The reason is because job seekers want that. There are lots of really skilled analytics people that don't want to project manage anymore, who want to be niche experts in analytics. And if the jobs will come available for those people, they're going to be really talented people that are able to step up into that role. People who I think also have the ability to not only execute, but evangelize, which, as we said, is the chicken and egg problem when it comes to analytics. So if they can execute and evangelize, they could help generate more revenue, more billables, more opportunity, create more value for the end customer. And so we encourage people to do that. And here's the other thing that people don't think about. These don't have to be full-time hires. You don't have to make the argument that I'm going to be able to make this analytics overlay billable 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year. The talent is out there that is willing to work on contract. So if you want someone who, oh man, I could get 10 hours a week, I could augment my staff, and while they're doing some execution, they could also level up some people on my staff who don't have the same experience they do in analytics. Those kinds of resources are available, whether it's fractional, part-time for impact opportunities, or we're ready to commit to a full-time resource. So be creative about how you think about integrating talent for analytics. And in the same way, it may be a fractional part of how you use the tool, an increasing part, but maybe a fractional. So too could it be a fractional human resource that comes in and has the same impact that the technology does.
Thanks, Jared. I've got a question for you that goes on both sides of the table. And you've mentioned before, and I know you have data on this, that in the post-pandemic world, remote work is an important factor. When you're considering the guidance that you've got both for the prospective employees and for the hiring managers, how is the remote work situation playing out?
Oh man, we could do a whole nother hour on this, David. But the short answer is, and I'll talk really fast because we really could do a whole nother hour. The short answer is, if you are a hiring manager and you have a fully remote position, and it can be based in anywhere in the US, and a lot of times our companies, our customers and the companies we represent lean on us for contractors because they don't represent, they don't have a tax in Illinois, they're New York, but they want to hire someone in Illinois, so they hire them as a contractor, and they don't have to hire them as a direct employee, but it could be a perpetual contractor. We have lots of customers that have taken advantage of the post-pandemic marketplace and the talent availability over the last few years and work in that modality. But we have other customers, big law firms, big vendors, they've got offices everywhere, right? They don't care what state, they're in all 50 states. Let's see people, those jobs get filled in 15 to 30 days. Right?
Excellent.
Fast. There's lots of people available. People move quickly. Virtual interviewing is now 100% of first round interviews and 95% of all subsequent interviews. I have people who only interview virtually, but then are required to come into the office 3 days a week. I know, which leads me to the second observation, which is Most law firms want you in the office 3 days a week. So if you're a law firm that has fully remote, you have massive advantage against all your law firm competitors in terms of hiring, right? Bigger pool of people, more interested candidate base. If you've got 3 days a week or more required in an office, it's tough. Your searches take about 90 to 120 days. There are not a lot of people that are willing to compromise on coming into an office. And so they just say no. So you have a far smaller candidate pool to choose from. And if they have to come into an office in one specific city, an even smaller pool. If it's a really big city, even smaller pool, you wouldn't think that, right? Oh, New York, more people, more options. But guess what? New York's like the #1 city people don't want to come into an office for, right? Maybe San Francisco is #2, Chicago #3. But this becomes a reciprocal challenge to what the intuition is of bigger city, more talent. That's no longer the case. I will also say this, if you want people to come into an office 3 days a week or more, or even at all, expect to pay a premium. Candidates want and will expect you to compensate them for the commute costs. They absolutely will. They are not going to take a lateral salary from a 100% remote job for a job that requires them to commute in 3 days a week. Not a chance.
Excellent. Jared, we've got a question that just came in from Derek Siffentes, and he asks, what is True seeing regarding relativity experts and masters with various certifications in other platforms? Are hiring managers wanting those experts in various e-discovery tools or focus on one tool? It's an interesting question because we've got all these relativity skills here.
So look, if you go to our website, you'll see we have checklists for a couple of the other tools that compete with relativity. The very honest answer, and this is not because I'm on a webinar with Relativity, is that Relativity just has a far greater adoption and history in the marketplace. And look, and I said this on our prep call, and I know if we were a CLE, I wouldn't be able to say it, but we're not, so I'm just going to say it. The brilliance of the certification program at Relativity, to me, is what gave them, in addition to their tool, but really this program gave them the opportunity to go and dominate the marketplace for so many years. Why? Because it's a certification that hiring managers trust. It's a certification that job seekers trust. And because it's so coveted, when someone has it, it gives immediate credibility to their skill set. And that hasn't changed as other organizations have started to roll out their own certification programs. I will say this. I don't know that the ecosystem of other certification programs and the adoption of other tools has quite caught up to the head start that Relativity has in the marketplace. Do we have customers who come to us and say, you know, I want Disco or Reveal or Everlaw or those skill sets? Of course. Do we have the number of people that require such a nuanced level of understanding of a job seeker's skill set in those tools that they would otherwise qualify or disqualify them prior to an interview as we do in Relativity? Categorically, no. Now, that may have good and bad implications, right? It also means that if you don't show a lot of confidence in certain skills, you could get ruled out by a hiring manager who may not want to invest in leveling you up as part of the hiring process. On the flip side, you're wasting a lot less time in the interview process, figuring that out along the way. And for us, that's a far greater value proposition than wasting our clients and our job seekers' time figuring it out for each other along the way. Let's get to where our confidence is. Let's get to the skill sets we're looking for. Let's expedite that hiring process. And look, let's advise people on both sides of the fence when they're going to need to step up and learn new skills on the job, and when the employer is going to be willing to do that and give them those new skills on the job, and what exactly are those skills. And now people are starting jobs and hiring people and the mystery has been taken out of those questions. They know exactly what they're getting into. And so that's what this whole analysis and process is really about. And we'd love to do it for the other competitors. We'd be happy to, but the demand from our customers for it to be a must, 75% of our customers require this checklist with a resume for Relativity, is extreme.
Thanks, Jared. Before we move on, Derek, my apologies. I have a feeling I butchered your name because I was a big fan of LA Law back in the day. If you have not seen that show, you should, because one of the main characters was one of the partners in the firm, and that was Cifuentes. And I am assuming that's the pronunciation of your name. Pardon me for butchering it. Jared, before we move on to Parker and Danielle talking to us about the certifications perspective, any other guidance you want to give for the hiring managers?
Yeah, real quick, I'll say this. EDiscovery project managers who are highly consultative don't want to process their own data. So you kind of have to, if you want someone processing their own data, my advice to hiring managers is if that's a must, know that you're going to probably have to level them up on some of the consultative skills that they may not have had opportunity to really mature yet. And if you're asking somebody to do the really mature stuff and then relearn processing, that's probably not going to work out well for you in the end, is my guess. In terms of review, just very quickly, seek out internal promotability while simultaneously increasing external talent. You bring someone in from the outside, they could level up 5 or 6 people on your staff where that skill set is defunct. In the meantime, who are those people with internal promise on your review teams that should level up and be able to add more value to the business? And as far as infrastructure people go, train more people, man. Look, you can't have all your eggs in one basket. Start training other IT people on staff to be backups for your infrastructure expert, because if you lose one, replacing them will not be easy or inexpensive.
Sounds good. Let's move now on to the Relativity certifications update. And let's start with Parker on this one because, no, actually, Danielle, we're going to start with you on this one. Sorry. Our new proctoring vendor, this is a big change to those of us who have taken certifications exams. What's up with the new proctoring vendor?
Yep. So we've transitioned to a new proctoring vendor. We're partnering with Prometric now since April. All of our exams are live. You can take 99% of our exams online or in a test center. And I do really recommend, I mean, not even for our exams, just for any exam, like your home, we're all working from home. Most of us are. Your home is not a great test environment. And proctoring vendors have a lot of rules that are kind of annoying, frankly. So anyway, enough of that. But if you're interested in any exams, you can always check out our FAQ on our relativity.com website on the certification page. It tells you kind of how to get started. The Relativity community also has a ton of information on the exams, the study materials, etc. And generally like our website. And I think, well, I'll save that for later, another update. But.
Sounds good. Thanks, Danielle. By the way, if I could jump in here with some advice, I can't say enough that I go along with Danielle on this on using the testing site. If you read our EDiscovery Data Discovery Year in Review last year, there was a whole legal case involved trying to take a certification test at home. I will tell you a funny story about getting into the testing center. As Danielle said, there's a lot of rules and requirements. I went for a certification exam, and as I'm going in, they say to me, Mr. Horrigan, I'm sorry, we're going to have to ask you to roll up your sleeves. And she can see the quizzical look on my face. And they want to make sure you have not written the answers on your body. And in addition to that, she told me the story of someone who had gone to the trouble of getting a tattoo and embedding the answers in a tattoo so they could not be seen, which made me think, boy, if you've got that much ingenuity to create that, why not use that ingenuity in studying for the test? But what do I know? Parker, let's move in now to that new certification exam that we've got.
Yeah, so to coincide with this launch of our new proctoring vendor last April, we also launched a brand new exam. So we launched our data management specialist exam just last month. So a brand new certification to our array of exams, and we designed it for professionals who handle data flows in and out of Relativity One. So it tests on some data management tools such as Collect, Rows, ARM, RIP, and things like that. So if you're someone who's using these tools each and every day, it's a great way to verify your knowledge with those. And if you're someone who's not too familiar with how to use those, it's a great way to potentially learn them and eventually verify your knowledge in them, and kind of upskill yourself with data flows overall, whether you're using Rel 1 or Server as well. So yeah, we're very excited to add that to our array of certifications.
Sounds great. Thanks, Parker. Before we get into our question and answer session with some of the additional ones that we've got, both Parker and Danielle, any general updates you'd like to give the audience?
Yeah, I think, in the spirit of learning and upskilling, everybody should think about how they can leverage their peers to learn more. Like, we work with really smart, fun, capable generally people. And so I'm a big fan of like shadowing, mentoring, talking to people. There's also formal training. So obviously, if you're into relativity, you can go to formal instructor-led relativity training. There's also a ton of great like webinars and tutorials and videos on our site. And of course, there's certifications. And I think I wanted to expand on something I said before. So David, you asked about our like pro level exams and what's the difference between pro and specialist. Currently, our program has like pro exams, specialists, and admin. And the admin really kind of spans all like products, all workflows. And so you really have to be kind of super technical to kind of take that on. Specialist, we kind of deep dive into one area of the product, like processing or analytics, as I said. And the pro exams, we've got 3 currently, and they're really lovely. You can walk away, you can study for a short bit of time and walk away with concrete knowledge about like how to talk about the cloud, or what is the cloud, what are the benefits of the cloud. And so I guess I would encourage anyone who's interested more in like relativity review or relativity 1. There's also the RCSP exam, the sales pro exam, if you're like in a position to sell relativity. But generally they all give you great talking points. You can walk out of it. You don't even have to take it, to be honest, but you should. But you can walk out of the exam with great talking points on key differentiators, benefits, how things work. And that's really for people new to the industry, or if you've been around and are like, maybe your company is considering a move to the cloud. I don't know, but it's always good to have different skill sets in your back pocket for when and if you might need them. And I think we were planning on dropping some links in the chat for you, but I don't think we can. So if you have any questions about relativity certifications or anything, you can always contact me and the team at certification@relativity.com for more information.
Great. Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah.
And Parker, anything you want to add here before we move on to Q&A?
No, I think that pretty much summed up all of our updates. Thanks.
Great, sure, thank you. All right, Q&A time. In addition to the ones we've had before, we've got one from Tracy Ebden, and this one is, how do hiring managers view the CEDS exam? Jared, obviously this is a question for you, but I'd like to pipe in here for a quick second, in that I serve on the global advisory board of ACID, so I'm a little bit biased here, but I think it is a two-pronged strategy. The CEDS exam gives you the certification and the credential that you have got general relativity knowledge. I'm biased on ACIDs, and of course, I'm biased on relativity. I've worked here for years. But one thing that we'll say on the relativity certifications, as Jared said, it's the one that's in biggest demand. And it shows that you've got a laser focus on what relativity offers, and basically you can use the software. Jared, where have I gone wrong on that one? And what would you say? You're dealing with these hiring managers on a daily basis.
Yeah, I would just add a couple things. One of which is, the way I often describe it to people who are new to the industry is think of relativity as a vocation and think of ACIDS as an education, right? You're going to get a lot more than how to use a tool from ACIDS, though ACIDS now has integrated a little bit of how to use the tool into that education. That isn't necessarily the same as a hiring manager having confidence that they can take your relativity skills and put them to billable use in X amount of time based on your achievement of certain certifications in the relativity certification ecosystem. It's just different. People value ACIDS in a different way. Some people don't need those plug and play relativity skill sets from a hire. What they need is somebody who can sit down in a room with an attorney and talk about how to interpret it in a subpoena, talk about the importance of referencing case law, and stop them from doing a self-collection on a forensic hard drive. And you don't need relativity skill sets to do any of those things necessarily. They certainly would help downstream, but I think ACIDS offers a certain perspective and set of educational skill sets that are valued differently than the skill sets that people are looking for when they ask for certified professionals in relativity. Keep in mind, as I said before, the value of the ecosystem of relativity certifications is that it is valued by the community, meaning it gives credibility to the people who wield it. So somebody goes out saying, I want to hire somebody for relativity processing, somebody has a relativity processing certification, that's instant credibility for that candidate.
Thanks, Jared. Also, Keith Mitchell is picking up your chicken and the egg analogy, and his question is, what is the best way to transition from another profession into a relativity career? Certifications first, or find a job requiring the skills? And he adds chicken or egg.
It's not chicken or egg. Good luck finding a job having made no self-investment in learning the skill sets that are necessary for you to break into an industry, and good luck in a down economy getting somebody to invest in you. It's crazy. You absolutely should go get the certifications first. That's your leverage. If you don't have experience using the tool, at the least that you have to come to the table with is, I attempted to learn the tool and attempted to pass whatever. So it doesn't matter which of the certifications, at least that you're trying to learn something. And, you know, Parker and Danielle will probably tell you to start with certain ones versus others based on what part of the industry you're looking to break into. But by no means should you wait to find a job. I mean, it's an interesting question, and no offense, but I think this is the problem with a lot of job seekers out there, is that they expect that the employer should step up to invest in you before you've invested in yourself. And self-investment is the single most powerful weapon you can yield as somebody looking to transition.
Thanks, Jared. We've got one from Kazitz Wadahan, and it is, can we directly give RCA certification exams? Should we start from the beginner level certification first? Now, I'm confused by the first part. I don't know if he's asking if someone else besides Relativity can give the certification exam. The answer to that is no. But Danielle and Parker, I'll let you take the one on where they should begin on their certification journey.
Yeah, yes, you can take the exam via the hands-on. The RCA is two parts. Hands-on, you must take online, but the multiple choice exam you can take in a test center or online. As for where to begin, I think it really depends on your role and your skill set. If you're new to Relativity, new to the EDiscovery industry, don't have a lot of experience, I would not recommend starting with the admin or the RCA exam. Really, I would probably recommend you start with one of the pro exams, either the Certified Pro, Relativity 1 Certified Pro, or the Review Pro, just to kind of like get a lay of the ground, like see what Relativity is more about, see what Review is like. You get images of the layout, you get resources, and kind of like test the water as in terms of like testing. I think they're also like low in cost compared to other exams, and you get a lot of study materials. So I would start there if you're newer. If you have been in a PM, admin, lit support role, you use things like analytics, you load data, you produce documents, and maybe you only do some of those things, then I think you could start with a specialist or the admin exam. I would recommend you go on the Relativity community and look at the study materials in the certification tracker, because it will list what is on each exam. And so if you kind of see the list of topics and you're kind of like, ooh, I don't do any of these things, like maybe kind of that's not where to start. But if you see it and you're like, oh, I definitely like load data and produce documents and kind of facilitate review in XYZ ways, then I think you would be more geared toward starting with the admin exam.
Thank you very much.
I'll jump in, David, and say this, though. It's really important for people to understand that from a job searching perspective, from a financial leverage perspective, there is no replacement for getting your RCA, right? The RCA is like, you know, the gold standard in terms of what Relativity hiring managers have confidence in the most broadest sense. So it's great to get all the other stuff, but you should always be looking to be working towards achieving that RCA, even if you're not using all those skills on a day-to-day basis. It's your leverage, right? It's your leverage.
Thanks, Jared.
Or a specialist exam.
We are running really hot on time. We're going to give Jared the final word here. Real quickly before that, I just got a text from ACID's president, Mike Guarraro. He basically said the same thing that we said, but Mike is saying that it's teaching the e-discovery lifecycle on the CEDS exam, and it's teaching the process rather than the software. Mike, thank you for that commentary. Jared, I'm going to give you the 15-second wrap up. Sorry for making it challenging. We need to be respectful of time.
Educate, educate, educate. You can never have too much education. It will always make you a better professional in this space. And Relativity has a rich portfolio of education for everyone to seek.
That sounds great. On behalf of Jared Coseglia, our certifications team, Parker Strubhar, and of course, Danielle Urban, they're also the people who help us out. MT, thank you for the logistics today. Sarah Brown over at True, and of course, Nia Bolden here at Relativity. Thanks to everyone in putting this on, and mostly to you. Thanks for sharing part of your day with us. Have a great day.